In the dry heart of Kenya, far from the tourist trails and wildlife reserves, lay a small village surrounded by golden fields and scattered acacia trees. Life here moved with the rhythm of the land, slow, patient, dictated by the seasons. The people knew the calls of every bird, the scent of rain carried on the wind, the distant drumming of hooves when a herd passed by. It was a place where the natural world and human life coexisted, each aware of the other's presence but rarely crossing paths. One hot April afternoon, that balance shifted. The sun blazed overhead, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Children ran barefoot along dusty paths, women bent low over rows of wilting crops, and men returned from grazing cattle. At the far edge of the village, beyond the fields where the tall grass began, a few herders paused. Something moved in the haze, large, deliberate, and unlike anything they had seen so close before. At first, they thought it might be a stray cow or perhaps a wandering buffalo. But then the shape caught the light. The unmistakable ripple of golden fur. A lion, one of them whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. Lions were not strangers to the land, but they belonged far away, deep in the wild heart of the savannah, where the wind carried the scent of zebras and wildebeests, not cooking fires and people. This was wrong. Something had driven the animal here. The herders watched as the lion moved closer. He was young, no longer a cub, but not yet in the prime of full manhood. His mane was just beginning to thicken, framing his face like the early crown of a future king. But his body told another story, ribs visible beneath his hide, legs stiff with exhaustion, fur dulled by dust. And his gait, it was uneven. One paw, the right front, was swollen and bloodied. Later, the rangers would argue about how he had come to this place. Some thought he had been swept away by the strong current of a flooded river and carried far from his pride. Others believed he had lost a territorial battle with an older male and had been driven into exile, wandering in search of food. Whatever the truth, the journey had been brutal. Over 700 kilometers of unforgiving terrain lay between here and the heart of his home range. By the time the lion reached the outskirts of the village, his strength was almost gone. Human voices carried faintly on the breeze. Instinct urged him to turn away, but another force, older, deeper, pulled him forward. Hunger. The air held the unmistakable scent of meat. Step by step, his paws carried him toward it. He followed the scent until he came to a clearing on the edge of the settlement. There stood the ranger's station, a modest building, its corrugated roof glinting in the sunlight. Beyond it, the smell was stronger. But the lion's body had reached its limit. With a final, staggering step, he collapsed onto the earth. His sides heaved. Dust clung to his fur. Flies swarmed at the wound on his paw. And yet his golden eyes, half-lidded with fatigue, still held a flicker of awareness, wary, but not yet defeated. David, one of the village rangers, was the first to see him. He froze in place. Even weakened, the animal before him was a predator capable of killing a man in seconds. But David saw something else too, not the stance of a hunter ready to strike, but the stillness of a creature on the edge of collapse. "Call the others," he said quietly. 2 more rangers arrived, rifles slung over their shoulders. They approached in measured steps, speaking in low tones to one another. "We can't just leave him here," David murmured. "If we do, he won't see tomorrow's sunrise." They radioed the Wildlife Protection Agency. Within hours, a small convoy of specialists arrived, veterinarians, trackers, conservation officers. They came armed not with weapons, but with kits of medical supplies and coolers of food. The first task was to assess the danger. A tranquilizer dart was prepared but kept in reserve. Instead, the vet set down a metal bowl of water and a plate of raw meat a safe distance from the lion. For long minutes, he simply stared, his breathing ragged. Then, slowly, he dragged himself forward and began to eat, cautious, each bite deliberate, as if testing the offering. The closer they got, the more obvious the injury became. The paw was deeply cut, likely from stepping on sharp stones or perhaps a rusted snare left behind by poachers. Infection had already begun. Working quickly but carefully, the vets cleaned the wound, applied antiseptic, and wrapped it in clean bandages. The lion flinched at their touch but did not strike. Perhaps he understood that these strange creatures in khaki uniforms were trying to help. Word spread fast. By the next day, children were peeking from behind fences, and elders came to see the wounded lion. Some brought meat as an offering, others simply stood in silence, watching the great animal rest in the shade behind the ranger station. The villagers began calling him Leo. But the specialists knew he could not stay. Leo was a wild predator. The longer he remained near people, the greater the risk, both to him and to them. He needed to return to his homeland. Alone, he would never survive the journey. That was when Joseph Illich, the regional official, proposed the unthinkable: airlift him home. It had never been attempted here. The distance was great, the cost high, and the risks enormous. But when the call went out to Kenya's Wildlife Service, the answer came back: approved. For the next day, the village buzzed with activity. Rangers built a reinforced transport cage from heavy steel. Veterinarians prepared sedatives, feeding supplies, and emergency equipment. A military helicopter was secured for the mission. It would be loud, hot, and turbulent, a difficult ride even for a sedated animal. But it was Leo's only chance. On the morning of the rescue, the entire village gathered to say goodbye. The air was thick with the smell of dust and fuel as the helicopter landed in a whirlwind of noise. Leo was sedated, his great body moved gently into the cage. The rotors thundered overhead as the cage was secured inside the aircraft. Then, with a deafening roar, the helicopter lifted off, rising above the rooftops. Below, the villagers waved, shielding their eyes from the wind. They would remember that moment for the rest of their lives. Inside the cabin, wildlife expert Alexander Schell sat beside the cage, headset on, eyes fixed on the lion. Heartbeat steady, he reported over the radio. The savanna stretched endlessly below, golden under the sun. For the first hour, the flight was uneventful. Then came a dull thud. Alexander's head snapped around. Leo's ears twitched. His eyes opened. Slowly, the lion lifted his head, blinking at the strange metal walls and the men around him. The crew tensed. A fully awake lion in mid-flight was a dangerous situation. But Leo didn't thrash or roar. He simply watched them, calm and still, as though he understood. "Looks like he knows we're helping him," Alexander murmured. The tension eased, but no one relaxed completely. Hours later, the pilot's voice crackled through the headset, approaching drop zone. Below lay the boundless grasslands of the savanna, dotted with acacia trees and shimmering under the late afternoon sun. The helicopter descended, kicking up a storm of dust as it touched down. The cage was lowered to the ground. A ranger stepped forward and unlatched the door. For a long moment, Leo didn't move. His nostrils flared, breathing in the sense of home. Then something shifted in his eyes: recognition. With a sudden, powerful leap, he bounded out of the cage, paws thudding against the dry earth. At first he walked, then began to run, faster and faster, until he vanished into the tall grass. The mission was a success. Months passed. The village returned to its routines, but the story of Leo was told over and over. Some swore they saw him on the distant horizon, others claimed to hear his roar echoing through the night. Then the drought came. Weeks without rain turned the soil to dust. Rivers shrank to muddy scars. Crops withered, and the cattle grew thin. But the worst danger came from the east, a herd of elephants, desperate for water, moving toward the village. Usually, elephants avoided human settlements. But thirst had made them unpredictable. They tore through fields, uprooted trees, and pressed dangerously close to the houses. The villagers tried everything: shouts, drums, torches, but the elephants stood their ground. Then, from the darkness, came a roar. Deep, commanding, earth-shaking. A massive shape emerged from the shadows. His mane was fuller now, his body heavier with muscle. It was Leo. He moved between the herd and the village, his golden eyes locked on the lead bull. Another roar, louder, sharper, rolled across the night. The elephants hesitated. One young bull stamped the earth, ears flaring. Leo advanced in slow, deliberate steps, muscles taut. He was not reckless, he was precise, feinting forward, circling, his growls low and steady. Some elephants began to back away. The stubborn bull charged, but Leo sidestepped with practiced agility, letting out a roar so deep it seemed to vibrate in the bones. Finally, the bull turned. One by one, the herd followed, retreating into the darkness. Leo stayed until dawn, patrolling the edge of the village. When the people emerged from their homes, they saw him standing in the morning light, calm but watchful. An old man stepped forward. "He's not just a lion," he said softly. "He's our guardian." A little girl, her eyes wide with wonder, stepped closer and whispered, "Thank you, Leo." The lion looked at her for a moment, then turned and walked into the savannah, disappearing into the gold of the rising sun. From that day, Leo was more than an animal. He was a legend. A statue of him was placed above the ranger's station, and travelers came from far away to hear the story of the lion who came back, not once, but twice, to protect the people. And out there, in the heart of the wild, Leo's roar still rolled across the wind, a promise that if the village ever needed him again, he would return.